Hey Mom, how you doing?
I could not be doing better. I am in Hilton Head. We had a great trip. We're back home for a couple of days before I hit that road again. So I'm doing really well, Lindsay. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, but don't act like all of that travel that you just completed was for work and just hitting the road. You were gallivanting around France, drinking wine on a beach, so I don't even want to hear it on this one.
Listen, somebody's got to do it, Lindsay. When you get to my age, you'll be happy to take that role. I am sure of it.
Oh,
So, yeah.
I'd be more than happy to do it now, but I didn't catch that invite for this one, so you know how that goes. But that is not what we're here to talk about today. We have a great agent on who I've gotten the pleasure of having great brainstorming sessions and hearing about his agency. So I'm really excited to bring him on today to the podcast to talk about all things being a scratch agency and using VAs and all of the decisions that came with that. Welcome, Daniel. It's so great to have you.
Thank y'all for having me on here. Carey, I'll back you up. When you're a small business owner, it's all about networking. Internationally, domestic, it's all about networking. So, you had your business owner's hat on.
Listen, you can never ever not be networking, and I am confident there are independent agents worldwide that need help, right?
Absolutely.
Daniel, I'm so
I'm
glad that you were able to join us. So, and listen, at some point maybe we could do a podcast in France. That wouldn't suck for everybody, right?
No, I mean, we could at least go to London, right? Don't they,
right.
have Lloyd's of
Yeah.
London over there we could broadcast from?
Absolutely, we could. 100%, no doubt about it. So, hey, Daniel, just quick for me, because we did say you're a scratch agency. Would you mind giving everyone a little bit of background of why insurance? Like, listen, I know why I'm insurance. Know a little bit about why Lindsay's insurance. It might be me, but what about you? Like, why insurance for you?
Yeah, good question. So obviously we're all introduced into it somehow, some way, right? So when I was in high school, I played high school golf, and the golf team practiced on the driving range in the middle of the afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And a couple of the older guys that were out on the driving range, I thought to myself, what are they doing out? Shouldn't you be working? And all of the guys on the driving range were insurance agents. And so I thought, well, I kind of want to get into insurance. I could, play golf and still work at the same time. Fast forward 16 years, I don't play golf in the afternoon. I can promise you. So that was false hope. But some family friends introduced me to it. And when I did 4.5 years of undergrad. And those last 6 months, I actually started working part time with a State Farm agent and ended up working 9 years with that individual. So that's what kind of got me into the industry was family friends.
Somebody gets you in, that's for sure, right? It's always what
Yeah.
that you're either born into it or someone makes it look so incredible that you come here. That's just the way it goes, right?
And then you're stuck.
No, then
Yeah,
you
then you're
love it,
stuck.
right? Let's go with then you love it.
Yeah, it's a love hate. But yeah, when you get pulled in when you're still in school, it's like when they stick you, because it's like you can do it part time. That's what I did while I was in school. I got pulled in right out of undergrad. I did it part time through my entire grad school until I went full time during my grad school, which is when we started spending a lot of time together. And still here. Couldn't get out. Couldn't get out if I tried. But I really want to talk about how, in this podcast, what I really want to talk about is things that agents are doing to innovate and drive efficiencies inside of their agencies. And one thing I know that you have really taken advantage of in your scratch agency is VAs. So, can you share with us what that decision was like for you when you decided to start bringing VAs into your agency?
Yeah, I'll kind of give you the back history. So as I mentioned, I spent 9 years at State Farm. And then I decided I was going to go the whole captive agent route, and then decided, nope, that's not for me. I don't want to make a whole career out of this. So I ended up contacting our local association and getting their assistance with starting my agency. And then fast forward, obviously coming from State Farm, we did personal lines, home auto life. And so that's what I really focused on once I started my agency. And as you and I both know, it's a lot of data entry, and that's personal lines and commercial lines. But for personal lines, it's a numbers thing. I mean, it's dealing with a lot of leads and trying to convert those to applications. And so one thing that I just got tired of doing was entering data. I like having the conversations with the customer. I like spending as much time as possible, but then the data entry, going to, markets, going to find the rates. And then I like presenting the quotes. And so it was a matter of how can I eliminate that off my plate? Another thing is raters. I have a carrier that does not participate in raters. They happen to be my biggest carrier. And so even when I was using a rater, I still had to do duplicate entries, even sometimes three. If you're doing your management system, or CRM, creating a prospect, you're going out to the other, carrier that we're going to quote every time, and then also putting it into a rater. That's just a lot of data entry. And so
Oh, yeah.
speaking with some folks about what technology they've used, they introduced me to using a VA. So when we talk about raters, I have a human rater, and he does all of my quoting for me. And it took some time to train him as far as, where to point and click and the information that I'm looking to get back. But I don't know if it's laziness or trying to just getting frustrated, but that's the reason why I got my VA, was just that data entry. And it saved me so much time now where I can be on the phone and go ahead and get them the information and then pick the phone right back up, and they're quoting something for me while I'm having conversations waiting on those, proposals to come back.
So Daniel, when you decided that the data entry was the thing, was there any part in, honestly, I'm with you. There's a lot of people in the industry that say that data entry is actually where they spend the most time. It's crazy. We're in this relationship driven business, but in order to do the job, it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of swivel chair things. Put it here, put it there. So I totally get why you went that route. But the question is, were there any things that you tried to outsource to a VA that maybe it was a good idea, but it didn't work? I would love to hear if there's anything that you encountered that way.
Yeah, and that would be in the scope of client-facing activities. Obviously, my virtual assistant is not in the United States, and so there was that language barrier. Again, trying to, I wouldn't say take shortcuts, but taking some things off of my plate. And one of those obviously is lead generation. And, we can buy lists, we can make phone calls. And I learned pretty quickly that my VA did not need to do client facing activities. So we reeled that back pretty quick. We tried it. I will allow my VA to email a prospect if there's one piece of data that's missing that's holding him up. I do request that he copies me in those emails. That way he doesn't look like a complete stranger to that prospect. But yeah, those client facing activities was something that just we need to be doing. Let him do as much of the behind the scenes so that we can do all those client facing activities.
I saw a stat recently, and it was actually done by Catalyst. They did a survey, and there was about 500 agencies that responded. And we know that that's a sample, but it's not everyone. But the percentage of agencies using VAs, do you want to guess what that percentage was? I'm let's just see. Do you want to take a wild guess how many people are using it?
Now I would say 70.
Using VAs?
It seems very popular.
6.
Wow. No, I was way off.
And what's funny is, I travel around and I talk at all these places. And what's interesting to me is it does seem really popular, but it depends on who you're talking to,
I
whether or
guess
not
so,
it's,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Depends
oh,
on who you're listening
yeah,
to too. I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy, super crazy. So definitely, I think that it's something that people are using, but I don't know that that's actually as mainstream as we all think it is. So anyway, I wanted to at least put that out there. So for those that haven't dipped their toe in it, I love that you've shared some things of what's worked in using a VA.
Yeah. And, our VA, we've taken it a few steps further. It's building blocks. Our VA is actually right now working with the company that I hired him through and working on building our CRM. And they're pulling him away from my task for half of the day. And they're going through all of the templates, all of the processes, and teaching him how to set it up. And then we're all going to come back together at the end of it, and we're all going to get on the same page.
That's
But that's
awesome.
some pretty heavy lifting to set up a
Oh yeah.
CRM. And so he's being able to do that for us, which is just another thing that's taken off of our plate. Even tracking things like signed applications, attaching certain files. He's being able to do those types of things that just, again, easier task off of our plate so that we can focus on being on the phone and having those conversations with our clients.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
What is your current staff to VA like ratio? Or like how many current staff to VAs?
I have two full-time employees here in North Carolina, and then my virtual assistant. And again, it's build a building process. Obviously, when you start out scratch, you do everything. Sometimes it's a little bit easier that way, but you're not going to be able to grow. You're very much limiting yourself when you do that. So my first hire was someone who was more CSR related. Take off some of those back end things for me, getting signed apps, answering some billing questions, sending out this and that to the lenders or dealerships. Take that work off. I don't like doing that kind of work. So that was my first hire. I just recently hired a personal lines producer. She did go through an insurance training course that's provided by our local association. So she did her pre-licensing and some vocational skills training. And so she's now up and going as far as being a personal lines producer. And my thinking for that was based on my background of personal lines. That was the first thing that I wanted to get off of me because I felt like I could manage personal lines a little bit better from a distance because I know the things that I'm looking for and how I can help them. And so I can focus my attention on things that our agency either doesn't have or don't do a lot of right now. And so, bringing on the personal lines producer and saying, we've got a CRM in the works, we've got a virtual assistant that can do your quoting for you. It allows the producer and I to focus on the skills training, the word tracks, and the presentation, and those. We don't have to worry about where to point and click.
Right.
That's taken care of by somebody
Right.
else. So that's our current setup. So my next hire will be an account manager because we're getting to the point with renewals and the phone calls for service requests. That's the next thing that we need to hire for.
Yeah. So, and speaking of hiring, like what is, in your experience, what is the difference been between starting working with a VA or hiring someone? Like, is it kind of the same experience or what's the differences there?
It really is. And the company that I contract my VA through did a lot of that heavy lifting for me. So obviously, they have a business established in the country that my VA is at. But the process was really neat. So I have an insurance coach as well, consultant. And so the owner of the VA company, myself, and my insurance consultant, all three of us were on a Zoom call. And then the hiring coordinator in that country was on the call. And they would pull in a VA one at a time. and they would ask them a series of the same questions and then give me the opportunity to ask a few questions as well. And it was just kind of one after another. And the thing that stuck out for me about my VA was he played sports, he was captain of his high school teams, he does triathlons. He's got that competitiveness to him and that drive. And that's what I needed as being the producer. So when we have, carrier contest or we have agency goals and we submit X number of policies, he's cheering and sending the emojis of the party hat.
Yeah.
He's really encouraging because he likes to win. And that's what I needed
Right.
at the time. I've got a friend of mine that I introduced to the same VA company, and he'll admit, he's just kind of all over the place. He's not a real detail-oriented guy. And so as he was going through the process, the VA that stood out to him, the candidate, was an electrical engineer. And so
Oh,
he's very detail-oriented. And so he hired that individual based on being very detail oriented. So it was a really neat interview process. But for me, I mean, they just stood out immediately as a fit for our
Yeah,
culture.
I know as a small business owner, the first hire that I made was a VA as well. So, and here's the thing, when you're first starting out, you've got to set up benefits, retirement, all of these things. When you start with a VA, you don't have to go through all of that to begin with. So I took the same route as you, Daniel, which was kind of cool. And I totally think that talking practically about what this looks like, what's the process to do it? How do you decide what works for you? It is a very personal thing for every agency, but it's super helpful for people to hear what your situation looked like. I want to talk about something else though that a lot of agencies, especially scratch agencies, consider. So as you're deciding to move from captive to independent, lots of agencies think about joining a network. I mean, number one thing is you need access to markets in order to be able to go independent. I know that you went through that process. Would you mind walking through same way? Like, what was your decision process? How did you weigh your options and what did that look like?
So for me, it was a matter of needing commercial lines markets, but also the volume commitments and also the expertise. So I'm very fortunate that the state director for the network that I'm a part of has a strong commercial lines background. He was even an underwriter for a commercial carrier. And so that's what I leaned on. If I have a risk that comes across my desk, and I know a little bit about it, but not a lot, I'll pick up the phone and call them and or call, the commercial lines director for that network and just say, here's what I've got. What is underwriting going to ask of me? What are some things that I'm going to need to get? What markets, what carriers do you guys have for this? But by
yeah.
being very personal lines driven in our office, the commercial lines was the piece that was just missing. And y'all know as well as I do, a carrier will give you an appointment based on your experience, but they also have volume commitments. And when you get up under a network that represents 1,000 agencies plus, you're up under that umbrella. And so it kind of insulates you to a degree of you're not having to meet some of those volume commitments that you might otherwise have if you have that direct appointment. So that was one of the main reasons why I joined the network. But then also the network piece of it, being a part of a group of agents where you can pick up the phone and call somebody or go to an event and be able to brainstorm and share ideas with one another, that's really important to me. So being a part of a network that offers that was something that I was looking for as
No
well.
question about it. And, obviously I look at a lot of agencies' makeup and those that are part of a network or cluster or any kind of group that we're talking about, it can really enhance that agency. It can put them in a position that others that aren't part of a network maybe can't get to as quickly, but it can also in some cases hurt that agency if they're looking to exit or whatever. So I guess the only other part I would say to it is it's a process. You've got to decide what's most important to you, what contracts make sense, what you're willing to give in order to get that is, all those things. But, for you, it sounds like it's been an incredible thing to be a part of.
It really has. And to your point, it is a process. I ended up going with the fourth network that I interviewed. And coming from captive, I was very reluctant to bring on one of the carriers that I have. They're not captive, they're independent, but they'll admit they're the jealous type. They want to be first in your agency, and I respect that. But some of the agency networks, to a degree, when you talk to exit strategies and things, they have some ownership in your agency, and it's very, very difficult to get out of some of those contracts. And there is no trial period. It's no, hey, try us out for 6 months. If you don't like it, you can pull out. No, once you sign that dotted line, they're a part of your agency, and you really have to build your agency around the network that you chose. And so I did not want to get back into that type of situation. Again, coming from captive, it was like, I'm looking for freedom here. And so I was able to get with a network that they just approach it as if it's their agency, and they're just trying to support you, whether it's excess surplus lines or some of the direct carriers that you're looking for those opportunities to place business with. And they allowed that, hey, we'll take a little bit of commission split, but you're free to go if you ever want to. And as y'all probably know, once you start to get some success with that network, there's no reason for you to leave them because you're having some success.
Absolutely. No doubt.
So I want to talk a little bit about being a young agent, right? With your own agency, your scratch agency, and finding time to be involved in so many things. Because you said you are involved in a network, you have a growth coach. Is that what you called it? What did you call a
I
consultant,
have
an
two
insurance
coaches. Yeah.
coach?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I
And
have
you
an
also
insurance
chair the Young
consultant that I
Agents
work with.
Committee. How do you find the time to do all of these things?
Well, top of the priority is raising young kids, right? Uh, you
Yeah.
know, we've got to be with the kids. And so my wife loves to get on to me because I have this problem where I struggle saying no. Uh,
Me too.
but but
Me too.
but it opens up so many doors and so many opportunities. For both of you have seen, being engaged within our industry, being able to see the world and see the nation, and be able to be around with very forward thinking people. Um, it opens up all of those opportunities just by saying yes. And so for me, I really wanted to get involved with our local association. And so I got on the Young Agents Committee and was on that for the past few years. And now I have the opportunity to serve as the chair. And so being involved with that, being more involved with the Big I as a whole, going to some of their leadership conferences, legislative day, things like that. And then being involved with my carriers. I really want to support them and going to their events and being involved with that. To me, it all boils down to networking. Some of the friends that I have gone through a lot of the things that I'm currently experiencing. And I'm a big believer in learn from somebody else's mistakes. For example, the CRM that I'm working on, 3 of my friends did it before I did. And I met all 3 of them through our state association. So had I not been a part of our association, I
Right.
wouldn't have been able to learn from some of their mistakes, right? But it's definitely the balance of life and work. Now, I'm a big believer in it is a team effort, and anyone that's involved in your local network, spouses, kids, parents, siblings, employees, for me as an agency owner, it's all about my network. It's a team for my wife and I. She understands that some evenings I'm going to need to work late, but we're going to get to go to Niagara Falls or to Michigan or wherever the place may be, and we're going to get those rewards, if you will, some of those experiences by being involved. And so it's definitely
Yeah.
a partnership, especially with my wife and I, but it's a balance. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to start an independent agency. Starting scratch is hard, but you've given yourself the freedom and the flexibility to choose. I'm going to go home and eat dinner with my kids tonight, and I'm okay working until 11 o'clock tonight because I'm not going to get that time back, dinner time. They don't care about me working. They want dad to be at home for dinner time. And so that's how I've
Yeah.
tried to juggle it. Again, it all starts with the support of a spouse or significant other.
Right. I love that you brought up the just say yes thing. I During the pandemic, I was in my undergrad in college, and I I don't want to say became obsessed, but I got really into this YouTube channel called Yes Theory. And they focused mostly on like travel and social things, but it laid a really cool framework for you can't let the fear of like saying yes let you not say yes. So they do all these like crazy challenges where they are like, okay, we're gonna fly a member of our friend group to France in this like remote area of France, and we're going to give them $20 to live on for 5 days, and they have to like make friends who let them stay with them, and they have to like do all these different things that normally no one would do. Like if you're like you would never go up to some random person on the street and be like, "Hi, I don't have any money for the next week. Like, can I sleep on your couch?" Like you wouldn't do that. And I think the same thing applies to networking and building your career. You have to say yes to these like random things that you're kind of like, "Oh, I don't know, this is like a little uncomfy. Like this might happen," or you might be a little anxious about, but they lead to the best types of opportunities in your career. At least that's what I found.
I completely agree. That's really neat.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that channel. It sounds like some
All
Yeah.
right.
entertainment.
Yes, theory. It is
But yeah,
entertainment.
you're exactly right. It opens up so many opportunities. And we've all heard the saying before, like you have to pay your dues. And I feel like at my point in my career in the agency, I don't know that I'll ever back out of this, but I feel compelled that now's the time to serve. Now's the time to be engaged. If I choose to make that choice later on, but now's the time to be engaged. And I don't view it as paying my dues. But to that same concept, I feel like I need to do that earlier on in my career than waiting till the
I think
tail
most
end
people
of.
that get engaged say
Yeah.
they get far more out of being engaged than they can ever give. And it's a thing that I love about our industry because it is 100% a consistent with everyone who puts the time in, they get it back so much. It's the thing that kept me here, to be quite honest with you. Like I fell in love with the agents that were willing to sit and give. It's really unique because name another industry where competitors come together and they share to their competitors like that. I don't know. It's super interesting to me. Well, Daniel, I want to talk about one other thing because obviously we're in a market like we haven't seen ever. Like I've been here for 15 years. I don't know how long you've been in the industry, but if I talk to anyone, they say this hard market is unlike anything they've seen, certainly in the recent history. I would love to know, how did it change what you do inside your agency? Have you made any massive shifts because of it? Or do you feel like you were well prepared for what was coming when we face a hard market?
So I started in insurance in 2000. So right around when you did, Carey. Honestly, I felt like I was very prepared for this. And the reason why, pros and cons in coming from a captive agency. Um, we only had one option. Okay, so when somebody came into our office and said my rates went up, or I've got points that came on, or whatever the scenario may be, we could not say let us shop it for you. We had to get really good at those conversations about why the rates went up. You need to be able to name off those few things, whether it's inflation, supply demand, catastrophic events. You have to be able to have that ready to go. But then also you have to be able to look at the policy with the customer and say, we've had this enforced, let's say homeowners, your inflation guard has really got this overinsured right now. Maybe we can take a look at the coverage, or here's a good reason why you may consider a higher deductible. And being able to have those conversations, because again, in my prior life, if we didn't have those, they're signing a cancellation request and we lost that account. And so I had to get really good at that really young. And I've been working with my team on those conversations to have. And I think one challenge of being an independent is being too quick to say, I understand where you're coming from. Let us shop it for you and see what's out there for a lower price. Because you get into the live by price, die by price, because then the customer knows next renewal, when it goes up just a couple dollars, they're still going to reach back out to you for you to reshop it. And then they're just going to go through the list of your carriers, or they'll go look at your website and see what carriers you have and say, I'd like you to quote it with this 3 or 4 carriers. So I think coming from being captive, it really prepared me for what we're dealing with right now with these rate increases, with carrier appetite, carrier underwriting guidelines. You've got to be willing to have deeper conversations with the customer and being well versed and just
And the
ready
beautiful
to
thing
have
about
that
it is you looked
conversation.
at what the roles are, what are the tasks inside the roles, and found the capacity. So you do have that ability to spend that relationship time with your customers rather than doing the administrative work. I mean, I would agree with you. Those that have actually looked at their agency and viewed it that way have been able to respond to the changing environment. There's just no way around that, right?
You're right. And, my average phone call used to be about 17 minutes. My average phone call now is 37 minutes. And it just goes to show I'm having those, I'm either getting more information on the front end, or we're having, we're building those relationships, talking a little bit more about personal stuff, which opens up, other opportunities. Or I'm being able to give more claims consultation. The list goes on, right? But one thing that I know I struggled with, especially when I was on the captive side, was cross-selling and upselling. Especially cross-selling was, if I'm the one doing all the quoting and I'm the one doing all the presenting, I might be less likely to pivot to another line because it just puts more work on my plate, right? And I've already got enough on my plate. And so it's like, I don't want to ask about this other product. Well, now, as soon as I get a yes, why don't you quote that for me? I'm throwing it off to the VA. So now I'm pivoting left and right because I'm not having to do the data entry, and then I call them back and get to do the fun
Right.
part of presenting it and trying to close it.
Yeah, I love that. It's fantastic. Well, Daniel, you have been amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much for coming on and sharing some of the things that maybe some agents are thinking about, but they're not sure how to get into that. I know there's a lot of agencies that are starting out and struggling in a hard market. And, you said it, learning from another person and being able to gain what they've learned is so, so valuable in our industry. So I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. If an agent wants to reach out to you and say, hey, listen, whatever you said, I'd love to chat more, how would they reach you, Daniel?
Yes. You can go to Raleigh Insurance Group and you'll find my contact information on there. If you want to call me, the number's not. I'll be more than, there's been so many people that helped me get to where I am and continue to help me. And so, we've got a Young Agents Development Conference coming up in a couple months here in North Carolina. I'm the chair of our committee, so I'm looking forward to meeting with some other folks. I love giving back to especially younger agents who are trying to just figure out, what should I be working on? What should I be doing? more than happy to have those conversations.
It was so good to have you on, Daniel. Thanks so much for coming and spending some time with us.
Thank you.